Why are British immigrants suddenly facing rejection around the globe? In an era where global mobility was once celebrated, the year 2025 has taken an unexpected and harsh turn for British nationals. Once welcomed with open arms in cities from Asia to the Americas, British immigrants are now confronting an alarming wave of bans and restrictions. Behind diplomatic smiles and political handshakes, a silent wall is rising, a wall that bars entry to thousands of hopeful British migrants. This isn't just about border control. It's about political backlash, economic retaliation, historical wounds reopening, and shifting global allegiances. In this gripping episode, we explore the 10 countries that have taken the shocking decision to shut their doors to British immigrants in 2025. We dive into the deep-rooted tensions, the diplomatic breakdowns, and the cultural shifts that pushed these nations to take such bold, dramatic actions. Stay with us till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping global insights from Discover the World. Number 10. Iran. Iran's ban on British immigrants in 2025 was perhaps the most expected, given the two countries' fraught relationship. However, this time, the action was not just symbolic, it was part of a broader security doctrine aimed at minimizing Western influence. British nationals were branded as agents of espionage, and the Iranian state media launched a relentless campaign accusing the UK of trying to undermine Islamic governance. All British organizations were shut down, visas were cancelled, and exit orders were issued with military precision. Even dual nationals were not spared. The ban served multiple purposes. It reinforced Iran's resistance to the West, it satisfied hardline political factions, and it warned other Western countries that Iran would not tolerate interference. The message was simple: British citizens were now persona non grata. Number 9. Malaysia. Malaysia took a surprising step in 2025 by placing a ban on British immigrants amid growing backlash over perceived disrespect toward Islamic values and internal affairs. Malaysian leaders cited multiple diplomatic slights from the UK, including comments on religious laws and press freedom, as key reasons behind the ban. British NGOs and journalists operating in Malaysia were accused of spreading Western propaganda, and a wave of protests called for an end to British influence. In a coordinated move, Malaysia ceased all work permits and long-term visas for British nationals. Kuala Lumpur's decision sent a strong signal, not just to Britain but to the world, that respect for cultural sovereignty was non-negotiable. British families living in Penang and Kuala Lumpur were left scrambling for answers as they were told to pack up and leave a country they had grown to love. Number 8. Brazil. Brazil's decision to turn away British immigrants in 2025 came amidst a rising tide of populism and anti-Western sentiment. After decades of globalization, Brazilian leaders began pushing for economic self-reliance and nationalistic reforms. British citizens, who had moved to Brazil for business, education, or retirement, found themselves framed as foreign exploiters rather than contributors. Political campaigns depicted them as part of the old elite that had drained resources and skewed opportunities away from locals. In a nationally televised address, Brazil's president declared that the country would be closing the chapter on unnecessary foreign dependence. The result was a full halt to British immigration, a freeze on pending residency applications, and widespread social backlash against the expatriate community. British citizens were shocked to find their lives uprooted in a country they thought was their second home. Number 7. Pakistan. Pakistan's immigration ban on British nationals in 2025 shocked many, given the extensive historical, cultural, and familial ties between the two countries. But beneath the surface, tensions had been brewing for years. Accusations of racial profiling in the UK, Islamophobic policies, and mistreatment of Pakistani immigrants in British cities finally triggered a breaking point. The Pakistani government, under pressure from its youth population and religious leaders, announced sweeping reforms that included the suspension of all new visas and residency permits for British citizens. The ban was presented as a form of protest against discrimination and inequality abroad. Many Pakistanis applauded the move, calling it a long overdue step in asserting the country's pride and dignity. British nationals with roots in Pakistan were especially heartbroken, now finding themselves disconnected from their ancestral homeland. Number 6. Russia. Russia's decision to ban British immigrants in 2025 was a geopolitical earthquake that echoed across Europe and Asia. After years of mutual sanctions, cyber accusations, and proxy conflicts, the Kremlin made a theatrical statement by announcing that British citizens were no longer welcome on Russian soil. The move was accompanied by an aggressive media campaign that portrayed British immigrants as spies, agents of destabilization, and symbols of Western arrogance. British educators, engineers, and journalists working in Russia were immediately summoned for questioning, and most were asked to leave the country. British businesses faced audits, and assets were frozen in what many saw as an orchestrated purge. This ban wasn't just about migration, it was about ideology, loyalty, and asserting dominance. For Russia, this was a symbolic win in its ongoing struggle against what it sees as Western imperialism. Number 5. Nigeria. Nigeria's ban on British immigrants was deeply rooted in a storm of resentment over exploitative trade agreements, unresolved colonial grievances, and a wave of nationalist economic reforms. In 2025, Nigeria moved to reclaim its autonomy by tightening immigration for those it viewed as benefiting disproportionately from bilateral relations. British immigrants, many involved in oil, finance, and telecommunications sectors, were accused of maintaining a neo-colonial presence. Civil society groups rallied around slogans of "Reclaim Nigeria for Nigerians," and the government responded swiftly. Immigration offices in Lagos and Abuja stopped accepting British applications, while deportation notices were quietly issued. The British community, which had once thrived under the radar, now found itself in the spotlight, as a scapegoat for years of inequality and resentment. Nigeria's message was unmistakable. It was time to reverse the roles and redefine the partnership on its own terms. Number 4. Turkey. The UK-Turkey relationship took a dramatic downturn in 2025 after a series of diplomatic incidents involving British politicians and Turkish domestic policies. The British government's condemnation of Turkey's actions in Syria and its crackdown on opposition figures led to rising hostilities. In a bold counter-response, Turkey announced a new immigration framework that excluded British nationals from work, residency, and even extended tourism visas. The Turkish government justified the ban on grounds of national dignity and sovereignty. Turkish media quickly amplified the narrative, accusing Britain of hypocrisy and meddling in regional politics. British retirees and digital nomads who had settled along the beautiful coasts of Antalya and Izmir were caught off guard, suddenly facing deportation and asset seizures. The UK embassy in Ankara struggled to manage the fallout, as tensions boiled over into public protests and online hate campaigns. Number 3. China. China's decision to ban British immigrants was not sudden, it was strategic. The move followed years of deteriorating relations between the two countries, especially after Britain's vocal criticism of China's human rights record and its involvement in Hong Kong affairs. In retaliation, China escalated its countermeasures in 2025, announcing a complete halt to immigration approvals for British nationals. The Chinese government painted the move as a national security necessity, but analysts quickly linked it to diplomatic payback. British professionals working in finance, education, and tech were given short notices to leave. Meanwhile, visa offices in Beijing and Shanghai turned away UK applicants without explanation. China's message was crystal clear: foreign interference, especially from its former critics, would no longer be tolerated. This decision sent shockwaves through the international business community and left a gaping hole in the already fragile UK-China relations. Number 2. South Africa. South Africa's evolving identity politics and national pride movements have reshaped its foreign policy drastically in 2025. British immigrants, many of whom had historical ties to the country dating back to apartheid-era migration, found themselves caught in the crossfire. Fueled by a wave of decolonization discourse and racial justice reforms, the South African government launched a policy review aimed at rebalancing demographic and economic inequalities created by historic migration patterns. British expats, often associated with privilege and land ownership, were now seen as a barrier to progress and social equity. Local activism surged, targeting British businesses and real estate investments. In response, South Africa suspended all new immigration requests from UK citizens and began the process of cancelling existing residency permits. The once thriving British communities in Cape Town and Johannesburg were left stunned as they faced a hard truth. Their welcome had expired. Number 1. India. The relationship between the United Kingdom and India has always carried the baggage of colonial history. While trade and diplomacy have remained stable on the surface, resentment has been quietly simmering underneath. In 2025, that tension reached a boiling point. The Indian government, reacting to several controversial statements made by UK officials regarding internal Indian matters like Kashmir and religious policies, took a firm stance. British immigrants, who once found opportunities in India's tech and education sectors, were suddenly viewed as unwelcome symbols of neo-colonialism. India, asserting its post-imperial sovereignty, introduced a nationwide policy halting long-term residency and work permits for British nationals. Many Indian citizens saw this move as a long-overdue reckoning, an assertion that India no longer needed validation or input from its former colonizer. The ban was also politically popular domestically, showcasing India's emergence as an independent global power that bows to no Western influence. What does it mean when the world begins to turn its back on one of its oldest empires? The British passport, once a symbol of privilege and global access, is now being questioned and rejected in corners of the globe where British influence once ran deep. These bans are not just about immigration, they are about history, power, pride, and the future. In 2025, the world is not what it used to be. Emerging powers are rewriting the rules, and former allies are drawing bold new boundaries. British immigrants now face a reality that few could have imagined just years ago, a world where they are no longer welcome. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to subscribe to Infosphere, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which country surprised you the most? And which one do you think could be next? Stay tuned for more powerful global updates, only here.